Come join Melissa and her guests on the Chats from the Blog Cabin podcast. From North Carolina, this podcast will have you feeling like you've known these folks for years. Listen in as they chat about life, culture, current events, and more, all with a special Southern flair. Curl up with your favorite beverage and get ready to be entertained. Tune in now for a unique experience that's fun and insightful.
Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of Chats from the Blog Cabin. You know, the show where I virtually invite people into the Blog Cabin to chat about life. And today we are chatting about this awesome book, A Hate Crime in Brooklyn. And David is here. And David, I love this book. I told you I did not expect the ending. We chatted a little bit before we came on. And guys, if you want an ending that is like a full turnaround, you need to read this book because you will not figure it out until the very end. But David, welcome to the show. Before we start talking about the book, before we start talking about the book, tell us a little about yourself.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me onto the podcast. I so very appreciate it, and very appreciate the opportunity to talk about my novel, which is dear to me for the reason that I spent my entire life as a criminal defense attorney, and I've always thought about writing, and but one of the things I was fond of when I heard an interview of an attorney that wrote they at an older age, still younger than I am, but at an older age, they asked if she ever regretted not having written a novel before, and now, you know, at a more advanced age, she was writing some successful novels. And she said that the thing for any writer is that there's kind of like a match that gets lit that you can't put out in terms of writing. And she said, for some people, it happens when they're in their teens. She says, for some people, it happens in their 20s, some in their 30s, and then some very late in life. And that's kind of what I found happened with me is, as a legal writer, I've written in the past, but whenever I attempted to write something creatively, even though I desired to, I'd write a page or two and I'd say, oh gosh, this is terrible, throw it in the trash bin. And then all of a sudden, about 10 or so years ago, I started writing with an idea about this novel. Instead of writing one page, I wrote like 10, 15 pages. And then I said, maybe I can do this. And then from that moment on, I became obsessed with it. And it took a very, very long time to finally get it final version that is this novel. It took about 10 years. One of the things I told myself, though, when I ventured into it was, especially because you can go up to a dozen lawyers and they'll all tell you, yeah, one day I'm going to write a book. I have so many interesting stories to tell. And it's just kind of funny because they have no idea what really is involved. You know, these were some of the same lawyers that used to come to me all the time to ask me to write their legal briefs for them because because so many lawyers are wonderful at running their mouths. You'd be surprised how much they can dislike putting pen to paper, especially when it's a painstaking, whether it's a legal document or a brief or a legal appeal or writing. So, but everybody thinks that they can write, you know, especially today with the shortcuts that the technology allows us. But at any rate, I told myself if I was going to do this, I was not going to be a dilettante about it. I was going to do it the right way. And I actually hired a British author to mentor me through the first draft. And I took courses and I read books on writing. And I found that actually understand the process of doing creative writing is as complex as going to law school and becoming a lawyer. Maybe in some ways it's even more complex because it is detailed in the things that you need to learn. And it was the whole process. The other thing that's been so wonderful about this is the process and being able to at a late stage in life find something to switch a gear and find something that I loved beyond beyond my wildest dreams. The whole process, I loved it, and you know, it's been amazing.
How hard was it to flip the switch to go into creative writing into legal briefs?
Well, that's a great question because it's actually extremely difficult at the time. Especially, I never when I used to write when I not used to, but when I've written legal briefs over the years, I started my career as an appellate lawyer, which was almost exclusively writing briefs, and I used to have people tell me that they thought my writing was different. That they thought at times, they said, people would say, David, your briefs don't necessarily bore me, and they thought so that was another reason I thought that maybe I could write creatively. I did not get a master's in creative writing. I just have my law degree, and what I found out is, I was so ignorant, it's hard to believe in retrospect. Like, first time somebody said to me, like, David, what point of view is your story going to be? I said, what do you mean? I thought everything was third person, and I just then realized, like, the different ways people write. And actually, what's also funny is that one of the first version of the book was actually written in multiple first person.
Oh, I bet you that was hard to follow.
Yeah, it was. It really was. But then through the process, I worked for a while. All the people are mentioned in my acknowledgments, but one of the people I worked with towards the end was an Irish journalist and writer. Although other people had said to me that it was first person's a big challenge, he had said to me, he said, listen, even the most successful, experienced writers in the world struggle to put together multiple persons talking. He says, if this is your first novel, he said you shouldn't do it. And then he said, it's like, to me, your characters are not realistic in third person. You don't. Maybe one day you might try to do it, but he didn't think, especially my female protagonist, should be written that way. So I spent another year or so transforming the novel into third person. I've also had the benefit of, it's been a bit of a family operation too. My brother who's a few years older than I am, who's an attorney, he's been with me throughout, and he's been like an amazing contributor to the novel and also an amazing critic. And he also thought that we had to restructure the book many times because the book has a lot of different transitions in time. And so we spent a lot of time restructuring the book. And another thing that was super, super difficult was, and sometimes I get a criticism of the book, that it's can be hard to follow because there's jumps in time that are really significant. And all the novel is divided into the protagonists in different sections too. And the time periods for each protagonist can be different. But when I get that criticism of the difficulty of it following to some extent, it doesn't adequately understand my desire to be historically accurate. I needed to be historically accurate with every figure. There's for example, the villain grew up in Albania during the time Albania was a part of a communist regime with a premier, and I had to fit that in. The male protagonist is African American, who was a victim of the Clinton drug sentencing, and which occurred in the 80s. And my female protagonist I had sent to the United States when she was only 15 years old, and I had to dovetail that in with the ages of the villain is her brother-in-law. I had an older brother-in-law, and the male protagonist who she ends up interacting with. I'll let the readers see how. I had to dovetail their ages too, so that was a real challenge. I always get I don't know, upset may be too strong a word for it. I mean, I got like a wonderful review in Kirkus, which actually recommended that people buy the book, which I understand that was quite, I should feel that that's quite a badge of recognition, because they're pretty critical. But they had said that they thought the jumping around was difficult. And I get sensitive about that, because I said, if you truly understand the book and the historical accuracy that I strive so hard for, you'd understand why it had to take place that way.
I could understand it, but how much research went into this book? Because obviously you based it on two real people as well. So how much research?
Yes, yeah. I mean, I guess first I should say the idea for the book actually came from my legal career has brought me to many places. It's like the majority of my legal career has been in New York City, but I also spent time in upstate New York. I also spent time in Florida, and then I came back to New York in 2011. And when I came back to New York in 2011, and I also spent many years with a federal practice. So that kind of criminal practice had brought me into contact with what I believed was people from virtually every walks of the world. Every place and every ethnicity, every cultural and national background. And I always felt blessed in a lot of ways that I've had such an opportunity to meet people so diverse, even if I disagree with any sentiment that's going on today that doesn't think that we don't all benefit from understanding and learning to be friends, and maybe even more with people from all walks of life. And when I came back to New York in 2011, I actually became friends with an Albanian woman, and who actually even introduced me to her family. And I had never, in all my years, which, like I said, I had met people from virtually every corner of the world, but I had never met anybody from Albania before. And she then told me things about her background and some things about Albania that were incredible to me. And it made me so curious. And I started to research Albanian history in addition to the things she told me. And it took a lot of time to research all the things that I researched. I mean, one of the things that I always tell people is that, as people don't know, is that Albania was the only country in Europe where during World War II, the Jewish population increased, because there's an Albanian principle that there's an Albanian moral code that is all talked about all throughout the book, that believes that exalts the guest who knocks on your door. And if somebody knocks on your door seeking refuge, you are to not only take that person in, but you are to treasure the protection of that guest even above your own family. So Jewish refugees that came to Albania during World War II were never turned over to the Nazis. They were hidden. It was like kind of like a Diary of Anne Frank protection. And there's even a documentary that you can find on YouTube about the bond between Albanians and the Jewish people for the protection they provided during World War II. And so it took a lot of research. And also the Kanun is also not all positive. The Kanun exalts the male over the female, and that's probably putting it mildly. And it was very oppressive towards women. There's a code, the Kanun, and people in northern Albania followed the Kanun even more than religion. It was just the moral code that guided their life. And so I spent a lot of time researching that. The male protagonist in the book that was more things that I know, because the male protagonist he's actually the inspiration for him was a client of mine, and who did in real life. He was serving a life sentence for a crack offense, which was relatively common in the 90s, particularly for the African American population, the whole issue of mass incarceration. And we reconnected when I came back to New York. And President Obama's last month of office, he granted him clemency. And that's, I was involved in his clemency petition. And he fictional in what happens to the male character in the book. That is, my client is doing very, very, very well, and we see each other all the time. But he was the inspiration. So I knew about his background. The villain is, I again, did historical research on Albania, and beyond the Kanun, Albania was a communist country ruled by a premier with an iron fist, and I did a lot of research on communist Albania, and then the transition to a democracy. So that was really painstaking research that needed to be done to be accurate on the book. One minor note, I guess I should say, is I also did some, I wouldn't call it research, but maybe more inquiry or more sensitivity than I've had throughout my life, because I'm a bit like my last name. Even though I'm of a Jewish background, I'm not really that. I'm not very religious. An important male character in the novel is a Jewish defense attorney that's not exactly modeled after myself. In some ways he is, maybe emotionally. So I actually even had to familiarize myself with some Jewish customs that maybe a lot of members of my family think I should know, but did not. So, but at any rate, so I got the idea for the novel because I just thought, having become friendly with my Albanian, and there's an author note thanking both the female that inspired the protagonist and my client. I actually mentioned them by name, and I just had a thought, what if I had a clash between these two people from such unbelievably different backgrounds, which still could take place, because that's what makes Brooklyn, is that people from every area of the world end up somehow in Brooklyn. So that's how I got the idea. I said, what a fascinating novel it would be if I put those two together. And that's what inspired it.
Yeah, and I will piggyback off of that. I went to New York in February, and I was surprised by all the different languages in New York City that you could hear just on the street alone. And I was like, man, we need this in every city, because it's so cool to hear all the different languages being spoken.
Yeah, it's just amazing. There's they always say the thing about New York is they call all these different neighborhoods it's I guess a little Albania, a little Korea, every a little Russia. It's incredible, and literally, it's also rather amazing that somehow it still exists today, even though the cost of housing is so difficult. But you still have these pockets and neighborhoods where people, it really is what. I was gone from New York for a while, and when I came, as I mentioned, and when I came back, it was just there's really. Maybe the only other place that's anywhere near close to it is London, but New York is New York.
New York. We need to take a brief commercial break, but then we'll be right back, and you're going to read part of your book when we come back.
Thank you.
The threats women face today are unparalleled and even more dangerous than ever before. 1 in 3 women globally has been the victim of an assault. Women are terrified, and they are looking for answers.
In the book, Street Smart Safety for Women, we draw on our experiences, both personal and professional, to provide those answers. It's by women, for women. Street Smart Safety for Women is available wherever books are sold.
And we are back chatting with David. He wrote A Hate Crime in Brooklyn, and now he's going to read part of his book. David, the floor is all yours.
Thank you. It's actually my first time actually really reading it myself. Probably a lot better to have, although I dream of an audio version of the book. Maybe it's in paperback, hardcover, and digital, but the only thing that is remaining, hopefully, is to produce an audio version. So I'm going to start at the very beginning of the book and take us through the prologue, and we'll hope it perks interest. So how the book begins. The bullet, made entirely of silver, is precious. The laws of the Kanun command that every woman present a silver bullet to her husband on their wedding day as part of her dowry. It is to be used to take her life if she's ever unfaithful. The bullet must not be found, so she hides it inside her vagina, wrapped in a tampon. She has just arrived in America. The airport building is eerily white with sheer glass walls and ceilings stretching as far as the eye can see. There are a multitude of travelers, yet not a sound can be heard. Trapped in a speeding current of nameless faces, she yells for her mother and father before being stopped, pulled aside, and ordered by a Homeland Security officer to walk through an enormous metal detector. The silver bullet sets it off. May-Fi, it's not my fault, she desperately tries to explain. She is 15 years old. She is speaking Albanian. They don't understand. She is 35 years old. She has lived in Brooklyn for 20 years. She speaks perfect English. Why don't they understand? She looks into the different colored eyes of the officer and freezes. Victor! Her blood-curdling screams bounce off the walls of her bedroom. Sophia awakens. Now I'm going to read the prologue. Prologue goes, April 14, 2018. Shavatov, my good friend. Best wishes for a great week. The first call David Sherman received every Saturday night, the moment his Sabbath ended, was from a special agent of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The Jewish greeting from Agent Ford, an African American, always brought a smile to Sherman's face. David Aaron Sherman maintained a small office in downtown Brooklyn for close to 40 years, specialized in criminal defense, and often represented indigent clients. Yet, despite being on opposing sides of federal prosecutions, Sherman and Ford had a special friendship. Sherman never forgot the trial where he uncovered a crucial flaw in the government's proof, which Dan Ford, as the lead agent, did not attempt to whitewash, even though it assured an acquittal. Whenever they ran into each other in the hallways of the federal courthouse, they found time to chat and occasionally even grab lunch. Ford unhesitatingly agreed to serve as a reference for Sherman's niece, Sharon, when, as a young attorney, she applied for a position as a federal prosecutor. Following the call, sitting in his favorite red leather armchair, watching his family gather around the living room after devouring his wife Elaine's legendary brisket and potato pancakes, Sherman felt blessed. His spacious home in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, easily accommodated dinners for his entire extended family, his wife of almost 15 years, his daughter a teacher, son a doctor, each with 2 middle-aged children, an older sister, and 2 younger brothers, their spouses and children, all of whom were deeply bonded. Sherman's cell unexpectedly rang again, this time with the chime reserved for Victor Hushemi's number. The fire in the pit of his belly, the one that was always lit by his number one client, ignited. In 1987, Sherman successfully defended Victor in a high-profile racketeering case. Years later, after Victor had established several successful and seemingly legal businesses, he offered Sherman an annual retainer so lucrative he couldn't refuse. Through the years, far too often, Sherman wished he had. Sherman, this can't wait. My driver's on his way to pick you up. I'm at my brother Edward's apartment. Victor, I apologize, but the Sabbath just ended. My family is here. We just finished Maliva Malka, our Saturday night dinner. It must wait. I waited until after sunset. They and God will forgive you. My driver will be there any minute. Be ready. Sherman's apologies for having to rush away were met with warm embraces of understanding by his family. Bending over the crib and planting a goodbye kiss on the forehead of his adorable grandniece, Samantha, the only baby in the family, summoned her husband to the kitchen. The first and sole love of David's life, Elaine was steadfastly supportive in all matters other than Victor. My God, won't you ever stand up to him, she pleaded, while she scrubbed pots and pans and dishes in the kitchen sink and opened and slammed shut the refrigerator. Sherman apologized, pecked Elaine on the forehead, and reluctantly trudged up the stairs to his bedroom. After putting on a white shirt, suit jacket, and pants, he was in the middle of knotting his tie when he looked in the mirror. Staring at his white beard, the unrelenting wrinkles on his face, the rings under his eyes, and his thinning face, he could not help but think, I'm way too old for this. Just then, the horn from Victor's Lincoln Navigator clamored. Sherman quickly went downstairs and reached into the hallway closet for his tan spring trench coat. Sighing, David made his way down the front steps of his house to Victor's driver, Adem Hajari, who jumped out of the vehicle to help Sherman step up into the passenger seat of the steep SUV. Sorry, Mr. Sherman, Adam apologized. I know it's your people's holiday, but you know the boss. Sure do. No apologies necessary, Sherman said with a kind smile as he leaned back and buckled his seatbelt. As they neared Flatbush Avenue, the street was clogged with demonstrators. Thousands upon thousands held signs, marching and chanting. Say his name. Say his name. Sylvester Stanley. These Zizaks are coming out of the woodwork, aren't they, Mr. Sherman? Like rats, Hajari said, laughing at his comparison. Adam, take a look, Sherman, his mood abruptly taking a U-turn, replied. There's just as many whites as blacks out there. The shooting was senseless and sick. White or black, I'm sure even Victor would agree. Holding up his right hand while his left remained on the steering wheel, Adam caught himself, recalling that Sherman frowned on his feelings about people of color. Didn't mean to offend, Mr. Sherman, and I get it, too. If a white guy was shot in the park, no way this case wouldn't already be solved. They say the shooters had an accent, maybe even one of us. If it was some white guy shot, every Albanian in New York would be locked up until they had him. I hear they're not even sure he'll survive. Heard any updates, Mr. Sherman? Last news reports has him still unconscious at New York Presbyterian. Chances of survival touch and go. Police are supposedly tearing up the city looking for the shooters and to identify the woman in the costume. Unless the feds get involved, I'm almost willing to bet they'll come up empty. Sherman kept quiet for the remainder of the ride. There was no point in telling Hajari that he knew Sylvester, had represented him in the past, and in fact admired him. If he were 10 years younger and his knees not riddled with arthritis, Sherman thought, he wouldn't have just joined the march. He would have led it. When Adam finally made his way through the crowded streets and dropped Sherman off, Victor was fuming in the hallway. Almost 6 feet, with a thin athletic body, the envy of men half his 67 years of age, Victor wore a light blue shirt, tan dress pants, and a matching leather jacket. His sharp, angular face commanded attention, while his eyes made it impossible to turn away. Victor was heterochromatic. His right eye was blue and his left dark brown. Unheard of for an Albanian. Where the fuck have you been, counselor? Your place is just a few miles from here. There better be a reason. I was in Adam's car the second he arrived. The streets are blocked everywhere by demonstrators. Fucking idiots, Victor sneered. Without paying any attention to Victor's words, Sherman silently followed him into his brother Edward's apartment and was startled to find Victor's sister-in-law, Sophia, curled up on the living room couch with tears streaming down her cheeks. Her dark brown eyes were bloodshot and recessed far back into her normally fine-featured face. Her strong, solid frame looked frighteningly frail. Whatever trouble was brewing, Sherman couldn't imagine the devoted wife of Victor's disabled brother having a role in it. Victor bent over Sophia and gently but firmly placed his hand on her shoulder. Tell him everything, Sophia. Victor threw Sherman a fierce look. Calm her down, counsel. She's talking nonsense, talking about speaking to the police. Reason with her, Sherman. Earn your damn retainer. Knowing that being a witness to a conversation between Sherman and a client, even Sophia, could come back to haunt him, Victor stepped back into the hallway and waited. Sophia, look at me. Tell me what's wrong, Sherman said in a paternal tone, as he took a seat alongside her, pondering the possibilities of her predicament. You know I'll do whatever I can to help. I can't, Sophia mumbled, her head bowed and her lips trembling. Then in a whisper, almost inaudible, she continued. Mr. Sherman, the shooting in Prospect Park. My God, Sophia, did you see or hear something? It's all right. You know that what you say here is completely confidential. I'm only asking to best protect you. Sherman was about to let slip that he knew Sylvester, but caught himself. No, that's not it. It's much worse. With her head buried in her lap, Sophia haltingly stuttered. The woman at the scene in the costume. The woman in the costume who ran from the tree. The one they're looking for. After seconds of agonizing silence, Sophia raised her head and looked through Sherman, beseeching someone far beyond the room. I'm the woman.
Wow. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is the silver bullet, because I was really like that. You thread that throughout the novel, too. You thread the silver bullet. Is that how did you actually learn about this? Was that
Well,
something that's actually
it's actually historically accurate that under the Canaan, a woman. I might have taken slight literary license with it being silver, but I think I've also even read though that it's silver. But it's definitely in the Canaan. It's written all over the Canaan that a woman is supposed to give a bullet to her husband before they get married as part of their dowry, and that bullet is to be used to take her life if she's ever unfaithful. That is historically accurate.
wow, that would scare me half to death. 'Cause who knows? The husband might find somebody they like better and like, okay, I'm just going to kill you, even though they didn't.
It's unbelievable. I mean, it's like, and it's still relatively commonplace. Well, I don't know, it's in northern Albania, but it's far from uncommon that women at a very young age are part of an arranged marriage, and they might even not know who their husband. I mean, you see these things in the novel, but you might even not know who your husband is until you're sent to marry him. It's hard to believe in today's world, but it's like the other thing I found interesting is that I think people are at least more aware of traditional societies, Muslim societies in the Middle East, and maybe even in some areas of like India and Pakistan. But I don't think people know of the oppression of women and arranged marriages from Albania. I think that, it's people still know little about Albania, which is one of the reasons that inspired the book.
Yeah, because I can't even imagine shipping. Like, I had 3 daughters. I can't imagine shipping my daughter out at age 15 to go marry somebody. To me, that just seems like horrific.
It's beyond horrific. The other thing that resonated with me in terms of also providing some inspiration for the novel is that there's it's also commonplace in the Hasidic community. In the Hasidic community, you don't have a choice in who you want to marry. The marriages are arranged, and women are extremely young, and they're supposed to, and they give birth to as many children as possible because the Hasidics believe that the Jewish population is at risk. So it's similar. I mean, I actually my son took while I was writing the book, my son had the experience of taking a trip to Israel, which is just birthright, they call it, where anybody with a Jewish background can go to Israel and experience it. And he met somebody on that trip that had was part of a Hasidic community in upstate New York, and he had fled. He was married to a young woman there, and he was only like, well, my son's age at the time was like 21, so he's about 21 too, and he was married to this woman in this upstate Hasidic community, and he fled, and he and I interviewed him after my son came back because part of the. I mean, I was thinking of having such a character in the novel, but did not. He had told me he's not welcome back. He's been excommunicated. Now he's living. So it's So so it did also ring a bell for me that in terms of that, I see it in the Hasidic Jewish community as well as the Albanian community. But I mean, the thought of not only being part of an arranged marriage, but you don't even really know what your husband's going to look like until the day you're going to marry him is unbelievable. And of course, he's going to be many years older than you are as well.
And then there's also that case where you talk about her sister in the book, and something horrific happens to her sister because I guess they don't check the backgrounds. They just think about what it's going to be like for their family and how it's going to help their family rise above stuff, but they don't check the backgrounds or the personalities of the people.
Absolutely. And I will say, hope I don't get myself in trouble, but with but in every one of these things I came up with in the novel. So, so it's fiction, but I mean, a lot of times I was thinking of calling the novel historical fiction, but I really tried to pride myself on. I see so many novels where I just feel like they're even bestsellers, but they're so contrived, and to me, they're like, I understand it's fiction, but it's just so not part of the world we live in.
For sure. Whereas I like the fact that you brought in the culture, you brought in everything that, the arranged marriage. You also brought in, like her husband had suffered some illnesses, and that he was very kind to her and looked
Yeah.
out for her. I like that. And then you have the juxtaposition of the brother being very, like, really bad guy, like really did what he said and you didn't question it. But I like how you balance those characters out. That's showing that even if you have the best of parents, that your child can still go the wrong way.
Yeah.
It doesn't depend on the parenting.
Well, yeah, the brother-in-law was like, follows the mantra of like everybody loves a villain, so you have to have the villain. If you have a great villain, that's another way of capturing people's attention. And but I have to give my brother a lot of credit for working with me on the husband, because it's funny, he had the thought. I mean, there were earlier versions of the novel where the husband wasn't such a nice guy, and my brother thought that was really trite, and then so I said, well, let me think about it, and then I came up with the idea of him being somebody who was traumatized by serving in Iraq. And my brother laughed. He said, I give you an idea and it's like you're on steroids with the idea. but people say, and it's funny because a lot of the comments I've gotten is that people find the husband, I mean, obviously everybody falls in love with Sophia and the male, but I've had many people tell me like they find her husband like heartbreaking.
Yeah, because of what he went, and he's kind of like the backstage from the older brother. He's kind of like in the shadows, so he's got to live up to what his older brother thinks he should do, and his family thinks he should do. But in a way, he just wants to do his own little thing and just medicate and be escape from the world.
Yeah, and it's funny, as the novel evolved, and I really made him such a sympathetic and have such a good heart.
Yeah.
As I said, it's a real process to write, because you just like strive so much to have a multi-dimensional cast of characters.
When you were writing, did you expect the ending to come? Had you plotted out the ending, or was it like the characters just led you to that?
It's funny, the ending, I was always, the ending was one of the things that came to me in the beginning of the novel and I held on to throughout. And I told my brother, as my brother like made suggestions for changes, I kept saying, I'm not changing that, I'll tell you that, all the years. And the ending was also a bit, one of the legendary writers who I don't know that I should even mention my name in the same breath, but who was an inspiration for not just the whole idea of how it like kind of plays out in the novel, is John Irving. In Prayer for Owen Meany, which I thought was one of the most amazing novels I've ever read. Obviously, my book is like nothing like it, but in terms of the structure and coming up with an idea like that, that I did, it was a bit of an inspiration.
There are so many different things that you could have talked about and really brought out in this book, but you chose to focus on the oppression of women and racial injustice. Was that something that's near and dear to your heart, that you wanted to make sure people were more aware of it? Because a lot of people don't think it happened. A lot of people don't think it happens in America, but it does.
Yeah, I totally. Well, obviously, the male character. Yeah, I want the whole world to always know about mass incarceration and just how racist the laws have been towards people I've represented that are getting the most heinous and draconian sentences that are not consistent with their crimes at all. And so, of course, as a criminal defense attorney, I wanted to shout about that. The oppression of women, it was really learning. The friendlier I became with Sophia, the female protagonist of the novel, the more sensitive I became. And I think even also as an older person, it's like, and I have two daughters as well, and who are always reminding me that I don't really get it. They're at a point where I'm not allowed to come to the defense of any man for anything he does. They're all like terrible people that are super sexist. So yes, but really, really, really very important themes to me. But then the other thing that was so important to me, and I'd like to think it's one of, a lot of times when somebody asks me to point to one sentence in the novel, there's a particular sentence in the novel that I would drift to that will surprise people. But it's that an important and essential theme in the novel to me is that I think that there's so much prejudice in this world. And even people who don't think that they're prejudiced, people who think they're the most open and liberal people in the world, I think society has inside us unconsciously prejudices that we don't shed. I have a very, very, very close dear friend that I think he's in the acknowledgments too, African American. That's he went to undergraduate school at Princeton. He went to NYU Law School. He's like one of the smartest people I've ever met in my life. And he said, he once told me, he says, I got to tell you something. It's like when I go to my health club, if I, keep my gym clothes on, I'm walking down the street and there's two white women on the street. They always go to the other side of the street. So, here's just the presumptions that are made. This guy could not be more educated and, someone to look up to in the world. And yet there's that kind of instinctive prejudice that exists. And, sometimes I think that it's just no matter how, we never want to admit it, but it's in us. Society has made us that way. And that was such an important part of my story, I felt, to show how even the characters that are not racist. I mean, I don't want to give away too much. Even the most open and kindest people, they don't realize until it comes out. And it goes in the other direction too. Even the African Americans have that feeling about it, white. So I think it's, I just think I wanted to craft a story that addressed that the best way I could.
Yeah, and you did a really good job of addressing it. I mean, I was not expecting it to end up like it did. I was like, wait a second, what just happened? And I had to reread it because I'm like, there's no way. No. And also it's a great book. Not only exposes the prejudice, but also exposes forgiveness and how you can forgive people. And I think that's a very important thing that we need to learn in our society today is we need to learn to forgive and move on.
Yeah, thanks for saying that too. Yeah, it's definitely a essential element of the novel. And that's why it's like, in trying to characterize the novel, it's like it was always hard. Like always being asked what genre it is, and it's hard to call it just a courtroom thriller because for me, that was the easiest part to write. The courtroom scenes were definitely the easiest, especially the roles of the lawyers. But as my person that's helped me market the book that has been so wonderful, she's always said that, one of the things that we really, in the end, we think it's probably more of a Jodi Picoult book than it is a John Grisham book.
I can see that. I definitely can see that. But you know what? It's something for everybody in this book. There's men can identify with some of the characters, and women can identify with some of the characters too. So there's something for everyone in this book.
Well, I hope so. I've been blessed with the reviews I've gotten. People seem to be really responding to the novel, and it's just been so rewarding to me. I've also been getting a lot of reviews where at the end they says, "Oh, it's definitely has to have. I'm definitely waiting for the sequel."
Exactly. That was going to be my next question. What are you writing another book?
Well, I've taken stabs. Yeah, I have a lot of different things on the burner, and I've written beginnings of some, and then what's also funny is that, and then I see current events, then kind of I was telling friends of mine, I've been waking up at 4 a.m. and current events have been turning me in other directions as to what to write. But what I also tell everybody though is that I better take from the experience of writing this novel, being able to put together the next one faster, because my clock is is not going to allow me to spend 10 years writing the next one.
Yeah, you got to get it out.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it might allow me to, but it'll be the only one I ever write again. And I like to feel I have, maybe, a whole bunch more in me, since I enjoyed the writing process so much. It's going to be, it's also, it's also important to hope that you have the audience out there desiring, motivating you. I mean, you want all the motivation to be internal, but knowing there's actually an audience clamoring, is a great feeling to inspire you to keep going.
Yeah, plus two, probably the second one might be easier to write since you said you did a lot of research.
Yeah.
You took a lot of creative writing classes and you did this and you did that along the way.
Yes. I feel like I've learned a lot about the writing. The only thing is that, I have, it's like the famous saying about it's just the economy, stupid. It's like what I tell people about writing. It's just the writing, stupid. You got to write. If you want to write, you got to write, and you just got to keep doing it until and you can't worry about whether it sounds good, it doesn't sound good. You just write, and then sometimes you surprise yourself. It sounds better than you expected, but it is a little bit different than what I've done my whole life as a living. Because sometimes if I'm still practicing right now, I think all the time about major part of me would like to be able to devote myself 100% to writing now, because I feel like I've had I've had wonderful experience as a lawyer, but I feel like I've had an opportunity to scale every mountain as an attorney. But if I end up in court and I do have to stand up and I cross-examine the witness, or, have to make an argument, when I get through, I say, God, that is a lot easier than it is to write. It comes to me so much easier.
This is something you've learned and you practice all along. Yeah.
Exactly. One is a growing, is something that's growing, and the other is something that's been part of my DNA for decades.
Well, David, our time is up, which I hate because I could continue on this conversation forever. Where can people find you?
Well, I mean, I do have a website that still hasn't been fully developed, but it's davidgsecular.com, and actually on Goodreads, I have a profile. I would invite anybody to just even you can just my email. You can always just email me if you have any questions. It's just David G. Secular. David with G is my middle initial, George Secular at AOL.com, and I'd be thrilled to respond to any questions or inquiries that anybody may have. But it's pretty easy to find me, and we're trying to get myself out there even a bit more. I've dabbled I'm technologically, so we spoke about this before, I'm so deficient that my marketing person, she's actually helped me develop an Twitter site. So I'm on there as David G. Secular author. But I can be, so there's many ways that I can be reached if anybody wants to give any feedback or has any questions.
And the book, A Hate Crime in Brooklyn, it's available on Amazon. Is it available anywhere else?
Oh, absolutely. It's available on Amazon. It's available on Barnes and Noble. It's available on Goodreads, and it's available. And there are some bookstores carrying it, and I've even seen it lately. Some libraries may not have it on the shelf, but you can order it. So all you got to do is punch in A Hate Crime in Brooklyn, and I don't even know that you have to punch in my name, and it'll come up. Actually, obviously I can't help myself, but I look all the time, and I recently got a great review from somebody in Pakistan. I don't know how you got his hands on it. So the book actually comes up on like Amazon site, and it's like I've seen it advertised on I think it's I'm not sure whether it's Amazon, but a site in Africa, in Indonesia. So it's like the book is all over the world. But it's just I just need the word to get out for everybody to start buying it.
So I will, David, thank you for coming on and for writing this book. And I cannot wait to see what you come out with next. I am putting it out there in the universe. There is going to be another book.
Oh, well, thank you, Melissa. It's been a pleasure. I've had a few of these before, but you were the nicest, I think, of all. Thank you so much.
All right, guys. I will put where you can find David as well as where you can find A Hate Crime in Brooklyn in the show notes. And until next time, bye, guys.
Bye-bye.